Grace be unto you and peace from Yahuwah the Father and Yahusha the Messiah, his son. This is Brother David coming to you to bring you America, the House of Bondage. Remember the song that we used to sing in school? America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You see the lie that they placed in our minds to think that this place is the country of righteousness when it is the country of wickedness. When other groups of people come into the harbor and they see this statue, they think of liberty and freedom. But for us, this statue represents bondage. Let me show you what I mean. Acts of the Apostles, chapter 7, verse 6 to 7. And Yah spake on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land. Whose seed is he talking about? The seed of Abraham. While we're on the subject of Abraham, let me address an issue. One of the brothers has stated that I need to use all of the Hebrew names of the patriarchs, of the prophets, and the Hebrew terms that they've taken out of the Bible. Let me explain my position. That is good when you're trying to reach those who are already enlightened. I'm trying to reach those who are just coming in. I have to come down to the level of where they're at. In 1 Corinthians chapter 14, Paul had to address the same issue. He said, when you come into the congregation, when you're teaching, when you're edifying the saints, read it. He says you cannot speak to them in an unknown tongue. Then he says that the person who speaks to them in an unknown tongue, he tells you also that that person is selfish. He only edifies himself. So therefore, my goal is to edify the saints, not to edify me. He's telling you that this behavior only edifies oneself. It makes them look like they're knowledgeable. That is not my goal. My goal is to raise up a righteous race so that they can make it into the kingdom. So please, when you speak of my methods of training, you have to be very careful, lest you go against the mighty one. He has given me this channel and the ability to teach. Now we're speaking about that his seed should sojourn in a strange land. That's Abraham's seed. Where was the strange land? Africa. And that they should bring them into bondage. They brought us here in Americas and around the world, and entreat them evil for 400 years. Now, the 400 years doesn't apply to every place on the planet, all the places that we were scattered. It only applies to one place. Did you know that next year, America's having a celebration for this 400-year period? They know that they've treated us evil. They know they brought us here in ships. They know they made us slaves. Now they want to give us a celebration. 400 years, 2019. I've also showed you the amendment that they made, the 13th Amendment, where if you commit a crime or you're convicted of a crime, you don't have to commit it. They'll make you guilty. You lose your rights and you become a slave again. It's only in America where they have written laws to keep us in bondage. Look at verse 7. And the nation to whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, said Yah. And after that shall they come forth and serve me in this place. Listen, he didn't say nations, because we were scattered to many nations, but he said nation, singular. The one whom they shall be in bondage will I judge. There's only one nation on the planet that we are in bondage in mass numbers. It's called mass incarceration. America. All over the world, they're speaking about the numbers of so-called African Americans that are locked up. So he's coming back to judge one nation. Remember, I keep telling you that I don't believe that America is going to bow the knee. I don't think that's going to happen. There's going to be destruction here. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68. And Yahuwah shall bring thee into Egypt, and Egypt means the house of bondage. Again, with ships this time. By the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. That's redeem you. So Egypt means the house of bondage. Let's make sure this is true. Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 2. And the mighty one spake all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah, thy mighty one. Note, this is what is important. To use the Hebrew name of the Father is the most important thing, and to use the Hebrew name of the Son. There is salvation in the name of Yahuwah, the Mighty One, not in the name of the patriarchs or the prophets, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Do you see the distinction here? Our ancestors were brought out of the land of Egypt. And then it gives you the definition of what Egypt represents. Out of the house of bondage. So we weren't taken into the land of Egypt, nor are we coming out of the land of Egypt, but we're going to come out of the house of bondage, where prisoners are guaranteed. Lockup quotas ensure that private prisons turn a profit. If a certain number of beds aren't filled, states must pay the prison companies for the unused beds, leaving taxpayers footing the bill for lower crime rates. Here are prisons with contracts that guarantee occupancy of 90% or more. Now, we guessed before that they had quotas and that they were targeting certain people to lock them up, to fill the prisons. But now we have proof. Look on the map. See where you're at. I'm in Florida. Florida has the most prisons out of every other state on this map. Florida has 7 prisons. The prison company is GEO. It's in the blue. There's 2 here in Florida. MTC, there's 1 here in Florida. And CCA has 4 prisons here in Florida. Now, on this map are all private prisons. The Huffington Post. After 3 violent inmates escaped from an Arizona prison in July 2010, prompting a 2-week multi-state manhunt, state corrections officials demanded improvements and stopped sending new inmates to what they called a dysfunctional 3,300 bed facility. Less than a year later, the company that runs the prison, Management and Training Corp, MTC, threatened to sue the state. A line in their contract guaranteed that the prison would remain 97% full. They argued that they had lost nearly 10 million from the reduced inmate population. Listen, if it wasn't for these people escaping, we wouldn't know this. It wasn't until the company, MTC, decided to sue the state that this information came out in the mainstream. What information is that? A line in their contract guaranteed that the prison would remain 97% full. How do you guarantee that the prison would remain 97% full unless you had some strategy to keep people flowing into those beds? State officials renegotiated the contract, but ended up paying $3 million for empty beds as the company continued to address problems, according to state documents and local news accounts. Far from the exception, Arizona's contractually obligated promise to fill prison beds is a common provision in a majority of America's private prison contracts. Hey, brothers and sisters, do you see that we're in the last days? Are you seeing that whatever's been hidden must be revealed? They have contractual obligations to keep the prison beds full in certain of these private prison houses. According to a public record analysis released today by the advocacy group In the Public Interest. The group reviewed more than 60 contracts between private prison companies and state and local governments across the country and found language mentioning quotas for prisoners in nearly 2/3 of those analyzed. 2/3 of those prisons have language saying that they have to keep their beds full. The prison bed guarantees range between minimums of 70% occupancy in a California prison to 100% occupancy requirements at some Arizona prisons. Most of the contracts had language mandating that at least 90% of prison beds be filled. So that's the number we're going to go with because that is the majority. 90% of the prison beds must be filled. Wiki. According to the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics, BGS, in 2013, black males accounted for 37% of the total male prison population. You got that? White males, 32%. Hispanic males, 22%. White females, 49%. Black females, 22%. Hey, sounds pretty much, equal or spread out until you realize that blacks are only 12.1% of the total population of the United States, yet we're more than 1/3 of the prison population. The house of bondage. Experts argue that such requirements create an incentive for policymakers to focus on filling empty prison beds. That is absolutely correct. That's what the quotas are all about, brothers and sisters. That's what these sweeps that they do in the black communities, that's what it's all about. When I was in New York, and I used to go to our church, Elam, we had an inspector who was one of the parishioners there. He used to come in and train us because it was a black church. It was a mega church. He used to come in and train the brothers. Guess what he told us? That they have quotas and they have to fill these quotas. So they go out in the black communities to fill these quotas. What did he tell us? Stay out of the streets at night. Let's continue reading. As opposed to pursuing long-term policy changes. They're not going to do that. Such as sentencing reform. If they do sentencing reform, doesn't that take the money out of the private prisons and out of all of the hands of the lobbyists and everyone who is down with locking up the Israelites here in America? That could significantly reduce prison populations. You can't do that. They have contracts. If they go below a certain level, then the state has to pay them. In short, many states are effectively obligated to continue to incarcerate people regardless of crime rates and public safety needs. So if there's no crime, we have to make crimes. Vagrancy, having a joint, a little weed in your pocket, or otherwise hand over taxpayer dollars in order to satisfy private profit-making companies. The house of bondage. The nation in whom they shall be in bondage to will I also judge. You're not going to find this anyplace else around the world where all of these laws and contracts and how they've come together in this confederate to keep us in bondage in America. It's only here, brothers and sisters. U.S. inmates staged nationwide prison labor strike over modern slavery. You'll find this at theguardian.com. Look, the prison strike, not worldwide. It says nationwide in the United States of America. They're telling you here that the prisons are using them as slaves. Now, they're on the inside looking out. They know what's going on there. You don't. They're telling you that this is modern slavery. We have to pay attention because this is the house of bondage. In the prisons, they're using them as a free labor. They give them a few pennies, That's supposed to make it right. That's just like how they did when we were slaves. They gave us, the hog maws and the chitlins. They gave us, the worst parts of the meat and the scraps from the tables to eat. It's the same thing. They're getting scraps. Now, this modern slavery that they're talking about, who are they enslaved to? Remember, there's big corporations that own the prisons who have negotiated with the private companies that are coming in and using this forced modern slavery to make merchandise out of us. List of 50 American companies that use prison labor. This is at ranker.com. There's the The website, the link. If you want to know which American companies profit off of prison labor, take a look at this eye-opening list. These companies have all used prison labor at one time. Do you shop at JCPenney? What about Walmart? Ladies, do you have those fancy panties from Victoria's Secrets? Do you get your gas from Chevron? Look, Microsoft is here. I couldn't make this presentation without Microsoft. What about your coffee? See that little mermaid there? It's telling you exactly what it represents. These people are evil. They're using us as merchandise. We are their food. This is the house of bondage, brothers and sisters. Yet our people want to be a part of this society. Wake up. Our time is almost up. Shalom.